Hello everybody and welcome. Just give me 1 second to kill the music. Nice and abruptly. There we go. So thank you for joining. I am not Dave Prince. My name is James Dancer. I'm the Group Technical Director and I am acting today as Dave's host, co-conspirator, collaborator, button pusher, chaperone, babysitter, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to be pushing the buttons in the background to give Dave a bit of space to do a nice live demo for you. So before we kick off, a little bit of housekeeping. I see a couple of you have already started using chat, so that's great. Thank you very much. If you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to ask a question in line. It's absolutely fine. But if you do, please use the Q&A button. There's a Q&A mode button next to where your typing box is for the chat. That will put a little red Q next to your question so that we know at the end when we come back for Q&A to make sure we answer it. And once we've answered those questions, we'll unmark the queue. So please don't remark it. We've had that a couple of times. If you forget, don't worry. Once you've posted a question, you can always click the little circle next to your question and it will put the little red queue on for you. And if you completely forget, we have Ryan from our marketing team in moderating as well. So he'll pick that up as well. For the last few webinars, we've had quite a few questions at the end. So we just want to make sure we get to everyone. So I will be back for Q&A at the end. But hopefully Dave is there and we'll turn his camera on right about now. Yay! We're getting really good at this. We've done so many of these now. We're getting quite good.
Not bad at all.
So I forgot to mention the webinar title at the start, actually. So this is Introduction to Windows MDM. Obviously, this is going to be Intune because there is no other real, proper, professional, top-tier MDM for Windows. And, okay, there are other MDMs, but Intune is absolutely awesome. If you haven't seen it yet as well, we do have another webinar coming up at 11 o'clock on Thursday, which covers Microsoft Autopilot and Zero Touch. So that's about getting your devices into Intune. This is about once they're in Intune. So I'm going to hand over to Dave now, and I will be back at the end for Q&A. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, James, or co-conspirator, apparently. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining. Could be various reasons why you're on this call. Maybe you are already dabbling with Intune, want to learn a little bit more about it. Maybe you're not using it at all. New concept to you. Maybe you're using group policy, Active Directory, whatever it could be on site. And you've heard that Intune phrase floating around for the last few years, and you kind of want to get a bit of a better idea as to what you can do with it. So that is the purpose of this session. As per everything, quite a big audience today. We'll kind of start from some pretty basic concepts here, and then start moving up to a bit more bit of show and tell, a little bit of here's how you do this, and here's what the interface would look like and why you would use it. So again, if anyone was on my webinar the other day, you'll see that I have pretty much copied my slides, albeit changed them here and there. So in this example, just painting a bit of a picture here, you have your school or your office, and within your school and office, you will have a Windows server, or at least I can assume you'll have a Windows server. This Windows server will most likely be running a combination of tools, features, utilities. Two in particular are Active Directory and Group Policy. Active Directory is, actually, sorry, I've just gone ahead one slide there. To explain where these come into play here, these are here to manage your users and what they can and can't do with your system. So Active Directory, and I must apologize for this text, it looked perfect on the presentation, and going live apparently it's blurred a little bit, but this is so a user will talk to Active Directory and prove who they are. It's their means of authenticating themselves and saying, this is me. Active Directory and Group Policy will talk to each other, and there is a lot more to the login process than this, but when a user puts in their username and password, they'll go to Active Directory and say, this is who I am. Active Directory will say, brilliant, okay, and here is the set of policies that you will have. So this actually says this is what you will have and what you can do, for those who can't read that like myself. So the combination of the two allow administrators to manage their user identities. So in this case here, you can do password resets, you can lock out passwords, you can do any identity management pieces that you require. So somebody goes away and gets married, you change their surname, you are managing their identity. Group policy on the other hand is managing how that experience looks and feels for them once they're logged in, which applications they're going to get, what can they do with their desktop, what desktop background they're going to have, how long will it be before their screensaver kicks in, all of these kind of things. So between Active Directory and group policy, you are fully managing that user experience on your network. Now, much like the demo the other day, I'm going to introduce a very American style house into the equation here. This is where the user leaves your site, leaves your school, and they head back home for the weekend, for the evening, summer holiday, lockdown in this case. And then, of course, you have the issue that when those users are at home, they cannot talk back to Active Directory, they cannot talk back to group policy. So instances where this can become a little bit of a pain, and I will add actually, obviously you can look at implementing things like VPNs, however, it's one more system to look after. If a user is at home and they forget their password, the password that they use to log into their laptop will be the last password that they ever had when they were on your site. If they forget that password and then an administrator needs to reset it, the only way they can go back and reset it is if they take that device back onto site. Much in the way group policy, if there is a particular critical business application that needs deploying down to your user's device when they're not in the office, again, you can do that fine when they're in the office, but when they're at home, you cannot use group policy unless you have a VPN to push applications, updates, change of policies down to said device. So this is where Intune can really, really come in and start to give you that ability to start managing your user identities and your device management piece outside of the office. Intune is part of Microsoft 365. I keep referring to it as Intune. It's now got a new name of Endpoint Manager, but I call it Intune because it's easier. So Intune is part of the Microsoft 365 set of services. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, how do I get that? If you already have Office 365, for example, then Intune and Azure AD, which are the two pieces that make up this platform, can be bolted on. You do have, excuse me, you do have various different license types that you can use to expand your, let's say, Office 365 instance to accommodate Azure AD and Intune. You've got standalone licenses for the both of them, so you can just buy them both as individual products. You can look at purchasing a Microsoft 365 bundle, which the premium version of does include those already. And you've also got what's known as the Enterprise Mobility Suite, and that includes Azure AD, Premium 1, and Intune. I won't go into a huge amount of depth on licensing here. It is a pretty long, convoluted topic, but it is quite easy to get these services enabled for yourselves. So going back to what we referred to in the previous slide, where you've got Active Directory that looks after your user's identity, and you've got group policy that looks after how it looks and feels for the user once they're logged in. Azure AD, which you can see up on the left-hand side of that Microsoft 365 cloud, is where your users will be able to prove who they are. And then you have, again, the ability for Intune to, depending on who that user is or who that device is, to push down policies to say what they can and can't do, which applications they have, and again, just how that experience looks for them. And of course, one of the main benefits of Intune over, let's say, group policy, for example, is it's not just policy management, it is mobile device management. You have the ability to remotely lock, remotely wipe, restart, rename, run an AV scan. There is a suite of little features that you can push out to your devices that group policy won't be able to. So I will cover a few of those in a moment as well. And if you're sitting there thinking, I've got Active Directory and I've got group policy already on in my house, in my environment, what do I need to do to, well, it seems like a lot of work to get Azure AD and Intune up and running. It really isn't. If you already have Active Directory, you can integrate that with Microsoft 365 Azure AD. So your user identities, your username and passwords that they're used to and they're logging their devices on will be the same as what they use to access your 365 services. So you aren't reinventing the wheel here. Little touch on group policy there. You'll notice there is no line between group policy and Intune. whilst the identity management side of things can be synced up, you cannot sync group policies to Intune. You can create new policies in Intune that effectively balance out what you're already doing with group policy. There is a little utility called the MDM Migration Assistant Tool, MMAT, which you can use. That it will go through your existing group policies and say, here's a list of what you have and here's how you can achieve that in Intune. There are still a couple of policies here and there missing from Intune, but they have done a very, very good job at making sure that the policies that are typically used in group policy are mapped across to Intune. And this is where the demonstration comes in. So let me share my screen. And I'm hoping you can all see this now. So this screen here is the Intune dashboard. You can access it through your existing. So if you head to portal.office.com, head into your admin center, along the left-hand side, you do have your endpoint management. I think Microsoft have rolled out that name fully now. There was a little period of time where some tenants would refer to it as Intune, some refer to it as endpoint management, and it did confuse quite a few people. Myself at the time, I was giving a lot of demos, and I'd log into tenant 1 and it'd be this, and log into tenant 2 and it'd be that. But it will be found under Endpoint Manager. So when you first log in here, you are presented with a dashboard. Now you can see at the moment I've only got one device hooked up here. That is just my demo device. But obviously, as your environment grows, you will be able to, well, you'll have a lot more than that. Also, as it says here, you can manage Android devices and iOS devices, macOS devices. And if you are one of the few 2 people maybe in the world who still have a Windows mobile device, then you can, believe it or not, still manage them. So point is, it is platform agnostic. Would I recommend using Intune for managing an iOS device over something like Jamf, for example? Probably not. Apple and Jamf can bread and butter, but it is possible. Like I said, if you're looking for something that goes really, really in depth when it comes to iOS and macOS management, then maybe look down the lines of Jamf. But the option is available. So I will head into my old devices here, and you can see at the moment I've actually got 2 devices, but one hasn't checked in for a long time, hence the reason why I didn't show up on that previous screen. So I can see here what my device is called. I can see where it's managed by. You might wonder, why is Intune telling me that my device is managed by Intune? This is where a nifty little tool, well, not tool, beg your pardon, solution called co-management comes into place. If you are already heavily invested in something like Microsoft's System Center Configuration Manager, there is something called co-management, which will allow Intune and, I'm going to call it SCCM, to co-manage devices. So you can have certain sets of management coming from SCCM on site. You can have certain elements of the management piece coming from Intune. Again, it depends on where you want to be managing these devices from, but you can have them managed by both. Device ownership, corporate and personal, is predominantly dictated on how the device enters the system. If a user manually enrolls a device, Intune will default that to be personal. It will assume that it is a personal device. If your device comes in via a hybrid Azure AD link, so if you have got your on-premise and your Azure AD hooked up and Azure AD integrates into Intune, then it will show up as a corporate. If it comes in from an autopilot enrollment process, and again, as James mentioned, we have another webinar on that on Friday to cover autopilot in a bit more depth, then again, that will come up as corporate because it's assuming...
Thursday, Dave.
Oh, beg your pardon?
Thursday for the other one.
Thursday for the other. I've lost track of days. I thought it was Wednesday when I said that sentence. Sorry, everybody. Thank you, James. And that's the reason why you're here. So, train of thought. There we go. Yes, corporate and personal will differ depending on how devices are enrolled, but Intune will always assume that the device is personal. You have your compliance status here. Now, compliance statuses typically come into play when you're using or looking at using something like conditional access. Conditional access, if you haven't come across it before, is basically an if this then that gatekeeper for Office 365. So if you have a device that a user's got at home, and that device could be anything. It's a personal device. It might not have antivirus. It might be absolutely riddled with malware, not BitLockered. It's shared with 8 different people in that household. That is not the sort of device that you want to be accessing your corporate data. And where the compliancy rules come in and where conditional access comes in is it will say you are only allowed to access Office 365 services if you are coming in from a compliant device, and that compliant device can be that it's running AV and that AV is up to date, that firewall's turned on, the device is BitLockered. Again, BitLocker drive encryption you might not have on home device, so you might want to use that one sparingly. But the point is here, a device can be marked as compliant and therefore safe to enter your Office 365, your Microsoft 365 environment. So what can you do from here? If I select a device here, actually I'll probably use the one that I've got the live demo on, I can retire a device. Now this kind of works a little bit backwards on this bar, but I'm going to follow it along. Let's say, for example, you have a device that is a BYOD device or a choose your own device. It might be part of a scheme that you roll out to your staff or students where you give them a benefit and you say, right, you go away, choose your own device and we'll contribute some money towards it. But once that 3-year term is finished, that device is yours. During the time of those 3 years, you will want that device to be under management. But let's say, for example, talking about a student who graduates, but it's their device, you will come here and you will retire that device. Retiring the device will not wipe the device. It'll move any corporate data from that or any educational data from that is linked to their account. But effectively, it takes it out of management so that that device is just a standard Windows 10 device, and that user can use it for installing their favorite game platform or Netflix or whatever it might be on. You can, if a device is reported lost or stolen, push out a remote wipe so that the next time that device comes onto the internet or makes connection back into Intune, that device will wipe. You can delete the device. You probably would use that one again quite sparingly. You wouldn't delete a device if it's still under management. It will mean that that is in a little bit of limbo when it comes to an unmanaged device and managed device. It will just be deleted from your view, but I don't know, maybe it's one that you've sent off for asset disposal. It doesn't need to be cleanly exited from the system. And then you have some sync. I'm skipping over remote lock because that's only for mobile devices. But you have sync just to force a check-in of this device into the platform to pick up on it any additional configuration policies or compliance policies or application deployments. Reset passcode, again, mobile device. Restart your device. Should you need to remotely restart your device, you can do. Now, Fresh Start is a very interesting one. Fresh Start will take your device back to out of box. If your device is not registered or enrolled in Autopilot, then Fresh Start will just take them back to the normal out of box experience. They'll click through, they'll create a user account, they'll connect to a wireless network, they'll set their privacy settings, etc. You then have an Autopilot refresh. Now, Autopilot, again, covering on Thursday, waiting for James to correct me. Autopilot reset will take that box back to a effectively out-of-box setup, but it's a means in which a user can pick up a device, or at least you give a user a device, and they log in with their credentials, and then it follows that out-of-box process according to your business's Autopilot profiles. Quick scan and full scan, you can remotely run AV scans on your devices. So if you're worried there's a threat out there, you can run scans. And finally, let's say, for example, you used to have BitLocker keys written down in an Excel spreadsheet, and that BitLocker key spreadsheet has become compromised. You can do a BitLocker key rotation, whereby your device Intune will send out a command to your device, generate yourself a new BitLocker key, and then send it back to me being Azure AD here. You can also, one thing to cover on quickly here, from the main devices page, you can go into bulk actions and you can say, perform bulk actions on Windows devices, whether you want to retire them. So you might have a cohort of devices that need to be gone from your system. Remotely wipe, restart, for example, maybe you're in an IT lab and you've got a bunch of devices that you've pushed a policy out for, but you want to make sure that device restarts just to pick that up, then you can do so from here as well. So, went back one too far. The next bit that is probably worth covering is compliance policies. Again, this is going to be a very, very high level overview of these. I won't go into every single policy, but you have your compliance policies. This is where you set this device must meet this criteria in order to be marked as compliant. So in this instance here, I have a compliance policy that I've set to all of my 2020 devices. And I can come in here and I can say that the device requires BitLocker, requires that code integrity is on, system security, for example, make sure it has got a password. There are a lot of devices that might be set up by home users where they bypass putting a password in, and you as an admin want to make sure that devices accessing your corporate, your educational material have got a password on them. Make sure they've got a firewall, make sure AV is running and up to date, and same for anti-spyware solutions as well. So this is where you can set that gatekeeper or bouncer, so to speak. You can only come in if this is the case. And then you have yourself configuration policies. Configuration policies are pretty much what they say on the tin. You can configure policies down to your users' devices, down to your shared devices, regardless of what it might be. So I'm going to come in here and go into Windows 10. So a couple of things to bear in mind here. As I mentioned earlier, group policy and Intune are not like for like. They're not 100% equal. However, that has come along leaps and bounds lately by the introduction of administrative templates. You can create and import ADMX templates from group policy into Intune. So if there's a particular policy that is missing from Intune and you want to go ahead and make sure you can push that down, then admin templates is your place to go. A couple of other things to cover here. You have device restrictions. Again, they are Intune policies based on users can do this. This is what this will look like. Users are not allowed to access the C drive, for example, whatever it might be. That is where you can apply restrictions. Domain join. If you do have on-premise Active Directory and you want to have your Intune devices go back to on-prem AD as well, then this is where you'd set up a domain join policy. And edition, upgrade and mode switch. That is a very useful one. If you have a suite of devices in your classroom that run in Windows 10 Pro and you want to get them up to Windows 10 Education, or let's say, for example, you're in an office and you've got Windows 10 Pro and you want to get them up to Windows 10 Enterprise, then you can do so with an Intune policy using edition upgrade. You just punch a key in there, scope it to the devices, and it will go away and do an in-place edition upgrade of those devices. You've got endpoint protection that manages Windows Defender. You can push down your VPN profiles and Wi-Fi config as well from here. So quite a big bit to kind of think about when it comes to Intune, when it comes to device management, is how you currently manage devices and how you want to be managing devices. We at Academia Retama, wherever possible, will always try and guide customers down the path of cloud first, because it means that you're having all of your infrastructure is now in the cloud. It's a software infrastructure as a service solution. You aren't having to have bulky on-premise servers. You aren't having to worry about on-prem backups. You aren't having to worry about keeping your business continuity plan going. Not only that, but again, management of devices outside of the four walls of your office. With that, it would require that you have a VPN. In some cases, you might not have a VPN. You might not want a VPN, in which case, as soon as your devices leave that building, they are unmanaged devices. You can't push applications down. You can't push policies down. You can't assist a user as well as you could do if your solution was cloud-based. So at the moment, the offering from Microsoft and Azure AD and Intune is a very, very, very compelling one. We'll touch on a few bits as well. I'm conscious of time and the fact I've been talking for quite a while. But I suppose that's why you're all here. You can also apply Windows 10 updates to your devices. You can manage your update policies and your update cycles here through Intune as well. So again, you can defer updates if you don't want the latest version of 2004 of Windows 10 2004 to be installed, and you're quite happy sticking with 1909, for example. You can defer for X amount of days. You can defer quality updates as well. Out the box, Windows will just do that whenever it sees fit. So this is where you'll come in to tweak that policy according to your business needs. And finally, quite a big one here. Again, whether you're using SCCM, whether you're using group policy to push down MSI applications, or maybe you've still got startup scripts that are that deploying executable files down to your users. Intune allows you to deploy applications. At the moment here, you can see I have a variety of applications pushed down to my one device. This can be a combination of, and I'll touch on this one in a minute actually, because it has a particularly good one. Microsoft Store for business apps. So if there are any apps in the Microsoft Public Store, you can push them down to your devices. You have your MSI line of business apps. So Intune does now allow you to push down. So now it's been quite a while. Does allow you to push down MSI. So if you've got an MSI in group policy or an MSI in SCCM, you can just chuck it into Intune. When you are on a paid subscription for Intune, you have unlimited cloud storage space in which you can store your MSIs and your installation files. There is a maximum limit of an 8 gig file though, so do bear that in mind. If you have created this massive MSI that bundles in, I don't know, some SolidWorks, for example, that I know can get up to 20 odd gig when it wants to, bear that in mind. You can also take executables. If you have executables, you wrap them into what's known as an Intune WIN file, and that will then deploy down to your devices via Intune. What I wanted to very, very briefly touch on here was the Microsoft 365 apps. Installing Office hasn't always been straightforward. Microsoft have done a very, very good job at making that more seamless over the last few years. With the use of Office Deployment Toolkit, you can just download that to one server and distribute out to your machines. Deploying it via Intune is remarkably simple. You will have your app suite configuration here. You just simply go add a new app, add Office, and it'll say, okay, which Office apps do you want to install? Do you want any other apps to come down with that? So in this case, Project and Visio. Do you want to be 32 or 64 bits? What update channel do you want it to be on? Then you click on review and save, and then any devices in scope will then get Office deployed down to them. So very, very straightforward deploy Office nowadays. I hope that I have given justice to Intune. It is a remarkably powerful product. It has come along a long way. It's only getting better. Obviously, this is quite a whirlwind tour, but I hope that has been good for you guys to watch. I suppose we can move on to some Q&A now.
Yes, I'm definitely ready. Give me 1 second and I will put the slides back up.
Probably should have given you more notice. Sorry, James.
No, we're all right. Don't worry. And camera, there we go. Okay, good. So, first things first, yeah, that was a bit of a whirlwind tour, and thank you very much for that, Dave. If you guys want a more in-depth look at any of this stuff, we're more than happy to do more webinars. We just kind of want to get a gauge of what you want to look at more specifically. So please feel free to throw that in chat, not as a question, but just as a chat thing. And very strong hint here, Ryan from our marketing team will take down some notes and we'll have a discussion afterwards. Yeah. Okay, nice. So there are quite a few. They're still coming in. So the other thing to mention as well is obviously there is a lot to Intune and a lot to MDM, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, SCCM now, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, Configuration Manager, and all that kind of stuff. So please do feel free to reach out to us if you need any help with that. We have a whole engineering team as well as Dave. His job is literally to help customers get from A to B, help plan that out. We can also migrate, install, set up, support, all of that kind of stuff. So that's something that is as close close as you're ever going to get to a sales pitch from us. So just thought I'd mention that because I have a big note to make sure I do. Right, so on to questions. So the first one is, what about group policies for third-party applications such as Google Chrome, etc.? Does Intune support the importing of ADMX templates? So it's kind of two questions in one.
Yes, it does. That was covered briefly. So you can add in custom ADMX. Sorry, beg your pardon. You can get ADMX templates into Intune. Yes, you can.
Okay, there we go. Out of curiosity, in cases of a clash between group policy and Intune policy, which takes precedent?
So if you are still running Windows 10 1709, which hopefully you won't be, it used to be a case that MDM would win. From 1803 onwards, you can determine which one wins. So there's a little trick in Intune called the OMA URI, which is effectively think of it as a reg key, I suppose you could say, that it will inform the computers how to handle conflicts. So what you'll have is this little key that you say what wins. So you can say, by default, I want group policy to be the winner regardless of what happens, or I want MDM to be the winner. So that is now your choice as to how you deal with those conflicts. If there is a conflict, then you will be able to find so in the event log. You'll be able to find so within Intune as well. You can see if there has been a conflict, and you can see how that was handled. So if you do set it to be MDM wins, then Intune then the logs will say this Intune policy has won.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Right. And hopefully Ryan will stop remarking the questions when I've unmarked them so we know that we've gone through them. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, on to the next one. Do local group policies and Intune policies, this is group policies, but policies conflict with each other? Is it possible to have a device both enrolled in Intune and bound to local AD, or is it one or the other? If bound to both, is this a bad practice? What is the best practice? Now, we've already covered some of that, but not the latter half, really.
Yes. So, when you can absolutely have group policy and Intune together. And I'll tell you what, based on the fact I've seen another question as well saying, can I show how devices are enrolled into Intune? I'll just reshare my screen. But to go back to the original question, I keep losing my mouse. Where's it gone? Which one were we on here? Okay, so you can have devices enrolled in AD and managed by group policy, and then you can extend that out into Microsoft Intune. And if you can see my screen here, I knew this question was going to be asked. Hence why in group policy here, there is an MDM key. And you can say here, enable automatic MDM enrollment using default Azure AD credentials. So what that basically means is, if you have an on-prem device and it's bound to AD and group policy, you set up a hybrid Azure AD just so that your 365 instance, your Azure AD instance, can talk back and pull objects through from on-premise AD. You can then say, and whilst you're at it, put yourself into MDM to give me all of those additional features like remote wipe, retiring devices, remote scan, whatever it might be. So it is not a bad practice at all, and Microsoft do facilitate the ability to do that.
There we go. That was actually, I think, part of the big reveal of Microsoft Endpoint Manager when they kind of said, oh, you can do all of this stuff combined. So we can send some content out afterwards as well that gives an overview of what the new sphere and suite of tools looks like, because as Dave said, there's been a lot of name changes and bulk application changes and things, but we can make sure we can send some content out afterwards on that. So next question: quick scan and full scan. Does this work if we have third-party AV client installed, e.g. Sophos? Or Sophos, depending on which side of the fence you are.
That is Windows Defender. It will not invoke, not to my knowledge anyway, not invoke a third-party scan. It will just run the underlying Windows Defender scan.
Okay. Can the Edition upgrade be used on Windows 10 Home Edition?
Oh, this is a fun one. So, no, is the short answer here. So for a device to be fully enrolled and managed by Intune, it needs to be running a minimum of Pro. So you cannot use, and again, actually, I will state this, I'll caveat with this, the last time I checked, I know that a good 4 or 5 months ago, it wasn't possible, that the device had to be in Intune first, which meant it had to be running Pro. And then from that point, you can use that Edition upgrade to go upwards from there. Home to Pro, the last time I checked, was not supported, but I will happily make a mental note to go away and double check that, because that's actually quite an interesting one to know if it has changed.
Yeah, we did have a bit of fun with a customer around that one, didn't we, a while ago? So that was hands-on experience with that from our side.
I was only 150 devices.
So, okay, next question. I'm in the process of hybrid joining devices so they can be excluded from an MFA conditional access policy. How should we address devices listed as Azure registered?
So again, if you're running an old version of Windows 10, I think this was rectified in 1803. 1803 was really the point where Microsoft started to go, okay, let's really start taking this Intune piece a lot more seriously. In the past, if you had a 1709 device and it was Azure AD registered, if you then hybrid joined that machine as well, you would have two entries and they wouldn't clean each other up. You had to go away and manually sort that out. With now, what it'll do is if there is a device that is already registered, then when you make it hybrid Azure AD joined, the two records will merge. You might see for the first 5 or 10 minutes or so that both of them are there, but give it a little bit of time and you will notice that the registered one and the hybrid Azure AD joined one will merge.
Okay. Does Intune meter application usage?
Does it meter application usage? If you're referring to licensing, then you can have managed applications and you can say, run a report, tell me how many devices this application is running on. If that is for the licensing perspective, so for example, if you've bought a 30-seat license for product X, for example, might be Adobe Creative Suite, for example, then you can run a report. You can take a look to see how many applications are running that, how many devices are running that application, beg your pardon. I'm hoping that's what you mean by the question.
Yeah, if it's not, please, please clarify and we'll readdress it in a little bit. Do apps and updates pushed from Intune storage incur data egress costs? That's everybody loves a good data egress cost when using Intune storage, right?
Yes. So this, I know, was part of the subscription for Intune. I'm going to go out and say I'm 99% sure it does not incur any additional costs as it is part of your license.
Yeah, you're not consuming a storage bucket, are you, in
No.
that case? It's part of Intune as a system or Microsoft Endpoint Manager
Much
as
the
a system.
same way as you're using SharePoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. So, where are we? How often do computers check in with Intune and can you specify this?
You cannot specify it. Again, at least the last time I checked, you couldn't. This is the joys of working with cloud platforms. Sometimes little changes happen here and there, and I hate committing to answers like that. But you can't change the default check-in time. The check-in times, there is actually an entire Microsoft doc on it, and effectively, when the device checks in, when a device is first enrolled, that device will check in. I think it's every 5 or 10 minutes for the first 8 hours or something like that until it successfully checks in. And then that threshold will drop, of course. Now, if you're thinking about, let's say, for example, group policy update, with a group policy update, you have GP on site, you'll push down the policy change to your device, and then you'll go to that device and run a GP update force. With Intune, you don't quite have the same when it comes to a command line piece with that. What you have here is if you want to manually sync a device, and I do appreciate there was actually a question saying, can I show you how you enroll devices? Absolutely. You'd come into accounts here, you'd go into access work or school, you'd click on your connection here. So there's my one connected to Azure AD. I'll go to info and I will click on sync. I missed group policy, but sorry, I missed group policy update, beg your pardon. That is how you would, from a client side, force a sync. From the admin side, of course, you can still do so by selecting your device up in your devices and getting it to do a manual sync by clicking that button. So if you are finding devices are taking a while to check in, then maybe they're at the beginning or just entered their next stage up to their next refresh cycle, in which case you can just push down a remote sync.
Cool. Okay, so we're. I'm just conscious of time, so we're going to try and whiz through a few of these. I know I appreciate some of these might be a bit longer answers. One thing I just wanted to mention as well is we do have a session, another webinar session at 2 p.m. on Friday, which is a roundtable consultancy session. So if you have any more in-depth questions, there'll be myself, Dave, and Gary Collins, who's one of who is our lead Apple MDM consultant as well. So if you want to go into a lot of depth, Friday's a really good session for that, but we'll get through as many of these as we can right now, just conscious that we've got quite a lot of questions to get through, so I should probably stop talking and ask some questions. Are apps available for install like through SCCM Software Center, or are they just installed as if mandated? So this may be a company portal thing, I guess.
It is indeed, yes. So you do have the option to specify whether an app is required or whether an app is optional. If an app is required, it will push straight down to that device. If an app is optional, it will be there for your user to go away and find it.
Apologies, just taking a quick drink now. Okay, is
turn your camera off, have a drink.
I did. That's because I've got a really nerdy water bottle that I'm not going to expose everybody to. Is Intune macOS support weak? Can you give examples of what it can't do compared to Jamf? So I could probably answer the first bit of this. It's not weak, it's just not as in-depth, I think, as Jamf is. So it doesn't have, like, Jamf has a root level agent that sits on the device that means you can basically execute, whatever you like as root. There are also a lot of very in-depth updates that Jamf do when it comes to Apple release a new software revision, and therefore Jamf support it fairly immediately. If you look at, there's a few press releases, again, if we can find the links, we'll put them in chat. If not, we can circulate after, about Microsoft and Jamf announcing their strategic partnership where you would do an integration between Jamf and Intune. And the message from both companies is basically, if you've got Apple devices, then use Jamf. For anything else, or mainly Windows devices, use Intune, but integrate the two, meaning you can do things like use Jamf information to trigger conditional access policies and things like that. So I think if you're only after like basic top level macOS MDM, then Intune works. It doesn't not work at all, but there's just a lot more features when it comes to what Jamf can do. We've got a couple of other resources we can send around afterwards. I'm just conscious I don't want to keep talking about Jamf for ages. Dave, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that at all.
Not really. I've not in a long time tried to manage a device, Mac OS device or an iOS device using Intune, so I can't really pass too much comment there, I'm afraid.
Okay, no worries at all. We are having an issue where devices that are firstly Azure AD registered, then we sync, they are via Azure AD Connect, they appear as hybrid join but fail to register. The only way to get hybrid join to be a success is to delete the Azure AD registered device, then run the command, I'm not going to read the command out, with admin on the local device, sometimes several times. Would SCCM co-management resolve this currently on 1809?
That sounds like a question I can't answer in a very quick fashion. That almost does sound like it's pretty worth a bit more of a chat. And I must admit, I actually recognise the name, and I haven't seen you in person in a good 4 years. So I hope you're doing well. But no, that's going to be a bit more of taking a look to see what's going on inside your environment to work out what is causing that.
Yep. So if just because this is being recorded, we're not going to mention names, but if the person who asked that question, if you please contact us afterwards, we can hook up a call and go through stuff in a bit more detail. Okay. If a laptop manufacturer captured an organization internal PO number, i.e. they'll do, would Intune/Autopilot capture that from them?
I'm trying to get my head around that question.
So when you, part of the order process, PO goes into manufacturer, so therefore the manufacturer knows the end user PO. Does Autopilot automatically catalog the PO against the asset when it's enrolled? I'm assuming that's what that means.
Yeah, so I think that is probably a bit more discretion between the distributor and the manufacturer. And again, depends on the process they have in place. Usually when it comes to uploading a CSV into Autopilot, for example, and again, this is something that we're going to be covering in a couple of days. If you are uploading your Autopilot device IDs or hardware hash IDs up into Autopilot, it will give you a field to say what purchase order was this related to. Again, if you're doing lots of individual orders as opposed to one big order, then that might be why you're asking this question. But I think that's a bit more of a distributor to manufacturer question than their process.
Yeah, if it's direct as well, it depends on their integration, their interaction with the Microsoft Partner Portal. So again, we can cover a little bit of this on Thursday, but there is an area when, as Dave said, when we upload the CSV to put a PO number in, whether that flows through, we'll do a bit of research in the next couple of days actually, and we can readdress that on Thursday if that's all right, Dave.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I've just dropped you in it live, but it's fine.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Any known plans to increase the file size for MSI? We have a few that are bigger than 8 gig.
Not to my knowledge. I'm afraid, not to my knowledge.
Okay. Does Intune have any size upload limitations for applications? I think we've literally just covered that one, haven't we?
Yeah.
So 8 gig is your max. I probably know the answer. However, does Intune work on bootcamp Apple devices?
Intune can work on any Windows device. Doesn't matter what sort of Windows device it is. The machine that I'm showing you at the moment, I am running a Mac. My physical device is a Mac. I've got VMware Fusion running on my Mac, and that Fusion is running a Windows device that's managed by Intune. As long as it's Windows 10, you can manage it.
Awesome. Can Intune handle OS deployment, or is it applications only? Is that what Autopilot is for?
So this is where the whole kind of imaging versus deployment comes into play. Anyone particularly familiar with the Apple side of the world will know, Apple side of things will know that Apple have effectively deemed imaging as dead.
Microsoft, I mean, say effectively, they definitely have deemed imaging as dead in their text.
There we go. Now, Microsoft haven't quite gone that far, but what they have, what they're more pushing towards now is you get a device, that device comes out of the box, and as soon as it's out of the box, you deploy your applications down to it. With Fresh Start, for example, you can very, very quickly wipe a bunch of machines clean back to the base Windows install, and then Intune will come along and redeploy those applications for you. If the person asking this question is from education, I know where you're asking this from because I used to do it myself, and it was a particularly painful process back in the day. But in essence here, what Microsoft are trying to move away from is the concept of pushing down large operating system images. Your device is running Windows 10. That device, with a couple of clicks as an admin user or via Intune, you can get that device back to pretty much brand new out of the box settings, removing the applications, removing the user profiles, whatever it might be. So it's kind of moving away from back in the days where you had Windows 7 and they were very thick static images that to do an upgrade, it was something you had to plan in, was something you had to take very, very seriously and could take the best part of a summer holiday, for example, if you're in a school. Whereas now the idea of Fresh Start is in a couple of clicks, that device will go back to the base Windows 10 install and then Intune will layer things on top.
Yeah, and I think it's fairly safe to say that as for a whole estate, regardless of whether you've got just Microsoft devices, Windows devices, or Apple devices, or even Android, actually with the Android Enterprise program, the general theory that all manufacturers are now going by is just imaging should be something you're phasing out probably quite soon, because the utopian society is regardless of where a device is deployed, especially at this time right now, you can deploy out of the shrink wrap direct from warehouse straight to user, and I mean as in our warehouse or distribution warehousing straight to the user, and then regardless of what that device is, that will auto provision, auto update, make sure it's on the right version of the operating system, install the apps, install the policies, install the profiles, and so that basically is where you should aim to be. And it's the kind of situation now is as an organization that's looking forward, you should really be looking to take steps to do that from now, because at some point it will be the standard, it will be the norm, and you won't be able to have the older imaging options. That's basically the same across the board with all vendors right now. But yeah, I hope that answered your question and a little bit extra on top. So there we go. So how would you enroll an entire student lab autopilot? Question.
Again, depends on the circumstances, depends what you've already got in place, depends whether these are new devices or existing devices. So for example, if you've got an entire student lab and they're bound to Active Directory on premise and you wanted them to be in Intune, then that is where you'd refer back to this group policy here. Automatically enroll in MDM. So that will take that device and get it up into the MDM. Now, one thing to bear in mind with regards to that is the concept of user devices and shared devices. You would, if you're in an IT lab, want to get these into shared device mode in order for this to be used across multiple students. Otherwise, if you did user-based, then user A would be associated with device A, and then if user B came along, it would still be user A, if you see what I mean. So if you want to get a suite of a class lab up in there, then it is this policy here you're looking for, and you'd want that to be device credential, and that would get them up into Intune. Alternatively, you can retroactively add devices into Autopilot as well. If you have SCCM on-prem at the moment and you're running, I think it's 1809 or 1810 SCCM, then there is actually a report built into SCCM that will bring those hardware ID hashes out for Autopilot.
Thank you, Dave. Where are we? Hybrid Azure AD bound devices. Can these devices be managed both on-prem and off-prem, i.e. co-management with SCCM?
So hybrid Azure AD bound devices. If your users are logging in with, it again depends, you're splitting this kind of down the middle into identity management and device management. If the users are still logging in with their on-prem AD creds and their on-prem AD profile, then obviously your identity management piece is going to be a little less than it would be if they were logging on with their cloud identities and fully embracing the Azure AD path. You can manage, you can have Intune and you can have SCCM running alongside each other. If you wanted the full integration, that's something that we aren't actually going to be covering in this particular call because it can vary quite a lot depending on what you've already got in place. But you can enable code management, which effectively means you're telling SCCM, I want you to go and do this. You're telling Intune, I want you to look after that part of things. And again, you are effectively bolstering up your remote management capabilities with the additional features of Intune like remote wipe, retire, delete, etc.
Awesome. I'm just going to skip forward one and then skip back. That really didn't help disguise the cough there, Dave.
It was quicker than muting my mic, sorry.
There we go. So just quick answer to these questions. Yeah, so sorry I didn't make it on time. Is there any way I can see this again? Yeah, it's being recorded. We will distribute a link out in the next couple of days. But if you want to check back on the relevant VTC page, I don't know if you came from the Atama or the academia side of our business and our branding. So academia.co.uk/VTC or atama.tech/VTC. Once the recordings are uploaded, the register button on the webinar changes to watch now. So you'll just be able to click that button and effectively re-register so you can watch it again. So that is there. Would you recommend using Intune for laptop and mobile management and AD/SCCM for desktops?
You're all going to get sick of this answer. Depends on what you currently have. It really, really does depend on what your current workflows are. It depends how you manage devices, where you want to manage the devices, etc. Sorry, I've got a bin lorry near me. So yes, you can use both. And again, it depends purely on what you want to achieve out of this. I wouldn't say just have AD and group policy and SCCM for desktops. I wouldn't just say have Intune for devices, for mobile devices. They can both work together and can both give you a full raft of features that will be beneficial regardless of whether they are desktop or laptop.
Yeah, and I think as Dave said earlier, our general strategy when we're advising customers is to look at cloud first, i.e. look at the cloud option first, because it kind of is the direction of travel that everything's going in. And if you look at what, asterisk, this is the opinion of myself, not Academia Group or any subsidiaries or Microsoft or any other vendors. Said that a few times on these webinars, that if you look at what is happening in the management sort of sphere at the moment, where Microsoft are now breaking up System Center and moving into Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So you've got Intune up here, and then you've got what was SCCM and is now Microsoft Endpoint Manager Configuration Manager, and they're kind of merging into one product. So the natural thing to happen is for it kind of to move this way and everything be wrapped into Intune. So in general, it's worth thinking, what can you do with Intune? And then if you can't accomplish something with Intune, then look at Configuration Manager, because the direction of travel is effectively moving towards Intune. So I'm not saying that's Microsoft's roadmap. I have absolutely no internal or insider knowledge about that, but that's just looking at what's happened and the moves that Microsoft and other vendors have made over the last few years. It's certainly looking like it's going to go more in that direction. So I just thought I'd mention that. This isn't a question, but I mentioned it anyway. Crikey, I built a lab image for our computing courses, and that comes in at about 150 apps and sits at about 430 gig in size. Time to recruit a packaging team, I guess. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is Company Portal could be really, really useful for that environment. So I'm not sure if you've got an Apple estate, or if you've seen what applications like Jamf do with self-service, but rather than blasting out 430 gig worth of applications to every single device every single time you're enrolling them and setting them up, it might actually be worth looking at whether you can have a core set of apps that are a smaller amount of storage, and have some more apps that are on demand, so you're not trying to push those out to all the devices at the same time. Obviously, it doesn't help the packaging thing. That still has to be done. But it does make for a nice light base image, if you like, and giving users a bit more choice.
I will quickly add, again, if these packages that you've already curated, already got there, if they are MSIs, then you can just dump these MSIs straight up into Intune.
Yeah.
If they're executables and there's any particular installation parameters that are available with that executable, then you can use a little tool called Intune Wrapper. Intune Wrapper is a PowerShell command. You just go, here's my source executable, here's where I want it to output to, go do it.
To be fair, there's probably some recursion you could build into a PowerShell script for that as well, and point it at a directory with a bunch of apps in and just have it do that on a recursive basis. So there's probably some fun to be had there. I say fun in inverted commas.
Yes, yeah, hence the I smile.
It depends how much you like PowerShell. I know you love PowerShell. So, okay, so I think that's it for the end of the questions. We'll give it another few seconds. There is a 10-second delay, by the way, between us and the chat, so we can hit a panic button or kill the feed if one of us says something we shouldn't. So that's why there's a bit of a delay. So we'll give it a few seconds and chat some rubbish just to see if any more questions come in, and then I think we might wrap it up. Dave, is there anything else you wanted to just make a point of on the basis of the questions and the type of questions we've had? Anything people should bear in mind?
I suppose just one overarching follow-up statement here is today's demo was, in hindsight, well, I say in hindsight, it was designed to be a very whirlwind, high-level tour of this, just to kind of plant some seeds, spark some ideas going. Please feel free to reach out to us if there are any questions. Based on the questions that have come in, there are a lot of... everybody's got their own setup. Everyone's used to the way they work. Everyone's used to the technology they've already got in place. If you're in the process or starting to think about these conversations about how can you move to the cloud, how you can move to Intune, please do get in touch. Every environment's different. I don't want to say something that answers one question that somebody who's got a different setup will take as gospel. And
it's a very good point.
It's again, every environment's different. So if there are any questions, any concerns, please do feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and so again, as I said before, if you want to go through anything a bit more specific, we do have a session on Friday at, I think I said 2 p.m. Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, where we are just going through is literally a roundtable, fire stuff at us. It's basically a long Q&A that covers all of the topics we've covered in the webinar series. So what we are going to do now is I'm going to put the outro video on, which will basically play a bit of music like you heard at the start. Dave and I will hang around in chat. So if you've got anything else you want to say to us or anything you just want to ask as a chat question, we're going to turn cameras and mics off and we'll hang around for a few minutes. So thank you very much for attending, everybody. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you very much all.